Today on the Holistic Health Bites podcast, we are joined with Carla, and she is going to tell us all about kind of infertility, fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and kind of the holistic approach to having healthy pregnancy and fertility. So welcome, Carla. Tell us all about you.
Hi, thanks so much, Andrea. I really love that I got the opportunity to be here on your podcast and video here. I went to the Nutrition Therapy Institute in Arvada, Colorado here, and I'm a nutrition therapy master with that's board certified in holistic nutrition. And so I focus on a couple of different populations of people. I do work to some extent with women around gut health and that kind of thing. But I also, my passion and kind of growing niche is working with women around fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum. So that's really what I am like kind of trying to focus my nutrition practice around, just because I also had my own experiences with a little bit of postpartum depression after having my babies, and really feel kind of in hindsight that I wasn't taking care of myself the way that I should have been taking care of myself. But I also didn't really have anybody to help guide me through that. Um, we hear the words postpartum depletion, or at least some of us are familiar with that. And I'm pretty sure that was probably going on for me. And it's certainly something that people need to keep in mind if they're having multiple babies and if they have the luxury of spacing the babies out, just to make sure that their bodies are really replete with the micronutrients, macronutrients, but micronutrients that they need in order to have another healthy pregnancy. And, just there's also some evidence to suggest higher rates of autoimmune disorders that happen postpartum. So that's kind of, anyway, what brought me to this work. And I also have, I practice over at Sattva Health and Wellness here in Lakewood, Colorado, which is a beautiful wellness center with a bunch of other women in the holistic realm.
Oh, I love that. So you do both virtual and in person between the clinic and your own
Yes,
practice? I love
I did.
that. I love that.
Yeah,
So people don't necessarily have to be local to you to work with you.
absolutely. That's right.
Okay. I love it. And your business name, your personal business name is Rebel Roots Nutrition. Tell me about that name. Where did that come from?
That's right. Just I feel like I've always been a little bit of a rebel in a lot of ways, just like just mildly bumping up against authority here and there, in a healthy way, questioning things, um, and asking questions and not just accepting what I'm told, or that kind of thing. And that's really what led me to holistic and alternative medicine and alternative nutrition, because our bodies are so they're so incredibly brilliant, and we have such an intuition that I feel like we've moved so far away from. um, the roots part, I think of, just I was raised as a farm girl, so I have this background of, garden to table, grass-fed, pastured animals, and I think about, being a bit of a rebel, and those roots, and that's sort of how the name came to be. And in some ways, it's so funny to me that we think of alternative medicine as being, or alternative, holistic nutrition as being like such a rebellious idea. It's like,
Right.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually getting back to what the foundations really were. It's getting back to nature. It's
Back to our
actually the
roots.
opposite of rebellious, but it feels so rebellious because it's so different than the way
Yes.
most of us are living.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just not as accepted as it should
Yeah.
be.
Right. And not as common. It's actually a lot more work nowadays because there's so many things that are not in line with that way of living that it's actually
Absolutely.
harder work now to go back to that.
Yes. Fully agree.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of more of your specialty with the fertility and pregnancy and postpartum. What are some common mistakes or misconceptions that you see that people come in with that maybe they think they're doing all the right things, they're following the right advice, but in actuality, they're making things harder or going down the wrong paths?
Sure. Well, I guess one of the ones that comes to mind to me is, women have a lot of questions around how much weight they should gain. And, um, you know, there's also this misconception. People love to tell women that are pregnant, well, now you got to eat for two, and it's just not true. I mean, so one of the misconceptions is around that. It's like, yes, we do need to increase the amount of calories that we're consuming, but really not so much until the second and third trimester. In the first trimester, you're not really eating that much more, and then in the second trimester, maybe around 300 or so calorie increase. It's going to look different for everybody. And when we get into the third trimester, about 500 or so calorie increase. And then for breastfeeding, about 500 as well, sort of the same. So I think that there's unfortunately a misconception around, what healthy weight gain looks like during pregnancy, because I mean, I know that you work with people around weight as well, and it's such a different thing. You can't apply the same concepts really um, to the perinatal stages. And so in the perinatal stages, your goals are different, right? I mean, we're trying to grow a baby. So we're focusing on, what is the same as nutrient density. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and everybody, I like to think of a 30-30-40 ratio when it comes to the macronutrients, just because that's easy. But of course, it varies. It looks different. Some people tend to feel just more energized by more fat in the diet. Some people feel more energized with more protein or more carbs. It just looks different. And I'm sure maybe you've seen that too. But this isn't the time during any of these periods. They're not the times to reduce your carbohydrates, and go on a low carb diet. We really want to be mindful of a balance. And so instead of this low carb trend, I tell people just healthy, nutrient dense carbs. That's what we want, not the refined stuff, but lots of vegetables that are going to be good for your microbiome, that kind of thing. But yeah, I would say that this is one of the misconceptions. Another one is just around weight loss postpartum. And I don't know if it's a misconception so much, but it's definitely a place where I feel like too many women are misled to jump to this idea that, oh, let's, I just can't wait to get this baby weight off, And I was one of them, and I went through that. And I do think that that was part of what just made me drained, energetically, irritable, and probably ultimately led to autoimmune, thyroid issue later on in my life. But that's just another place where I really like to focus and work with women around, okay, there is so much time to focus on that. You have plenty of time to get there, but let's really focus on what is going to make you feel good, what's going to help you sleep. And these are the things that ultimately are actually going to benefit and impact that weight loss more effectively later.
Yeah, absolutely. So really your best advice would be for anyone who does want to lose weight after having a baby, really they need to wait until they're done breastfeeding, when the baby's kind of more independent, eating their own foods that aren't reliant on your body still. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's so much demand, especially if the mom is breastfeeding. But even if the mom is not breastfeeding, you're still going to have a lack of sleep. You're still, I mean, and that's just the reality. And we have to adjust to that. But there's still going to be such a demand energetically on you. And, it's a time to focus on rebuilding and refueling and replenishing those micronutrients so that you then, yes, you're making sure that baby's getting what they need, but you're also getting what you need as well. Um, Too often I think that baby will get what baby needs, but at the cost of what the mom needs as well.
Yeah, that I see. I think you're right on that. I think so much of our energy just as human beings goes into taking care of other people, and we
Yes,
completely deplete ourselves in the process. And that even outside of being a parent.
absolutely. I was just going to say, just as a woman in general, I
Yeah.
think that's kind of like a female tendency, and I know plenty of men who can do that as well. But yeah, it's it's hard.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a little bit about some postpartum depression that you struggled with, and this is a really common situation. Do you have any thoughts around, why that is? Is that because of these nutrient depletions? Is it just because you're so tired? Like, what is really kind of the root behind that postpartum depression?
Sure. So, it really can be a combination of those things, but I know that, two of the main factors, like the highest risk factors for developing postpartum mood disorders is having a pre-existing mood disorder. So just really being very aware and conscious of, okay, I already have this tendency to be depressed or anxiety towards anxiety, and what's my support right now, and how do I carry that through? So I think that's one thing. And certainly there are vitamins and nutrients involved. And so that would be something to think about. Vitamin D plays a major role, even though we're not exactly sure what the mechanism is, but vitamin D plays a role. B6, some of the other B vitamins play a major role because they also, really contribute to energy. Um, and so, and I mean, just getting enough fat, like we need to make sure we're getting enough healthy fats to build our hormones, right? So a lot of that as well. But a statistic that I found that so interesting around this is that the second highest risk factor for mood disorders is actually not having a supportive partner. And so, I mean, it just goes to show like we can do all the things nutritionally, but if we're not, in a healthy relationship and we're not maybe looking at, well, how can I support this relationship? That's really important as well.
Yeah, and I probably even beyond that, but other supportive relationships. Do you have friends?
Yes,
Do you have grandparents or aunts and
absolutely.
uncles, or, do you have other people to reach out to? Because, there's
Mhm.
kind of the sort of a joke that it takes a village, but it really does, and it should. No one
Yes,
should be expected to do all of these things by themselves, or to actually have all of those people contributing to problems in their lives,
absolutely.
making it
And
harder.
my background also is as a doula, postpartum doula. And this is why there's doulas too. I mean, and there's such a rise of them. I did not have one my first pregnancy, but the second pregnancy I had a doula, and it was just so different. I mean, sure, it was also my second child. I'm sure I was like, okay, I've done this before. There's a little bit of that, but I just knew I was really aware of needing support in certain areas, and that's why they're there, or, I always suggest if it's in the budget for people, consider a doula, consider a nanny, so that, and obviously, switching off with your partner so that you both are getting sleep. And because lack of sleep is a really big contributor as well. And so, again, it's going to look different no matter what. It's going to be broken up. It's not going to be, a solid 8 anymore. But um, getting some quality hours of sleep is really important to address and kind of um, be proactive against mood disorders.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I've had so many friends. I don't have kids myself, but I have so many friends who did have kids. And in those early stages, when you are getting up in the middle of the night to do feedings and changing diapers and all of those things, I had so many friends who felt like they had to do all of that, that
Yeah.
the dad could not contribute at all. They had to be super mom. They had to do all the things. They had to get up every single time the baby needed something. And that's just such a misconception.
Yes.
You do not have to do it all. You do not have to be super mom taking care of everything, including your entire household and this new baby. I think, like you said earlier, we as women tend to want to be the ones in charge of all the nurturing and all the taking care of everything,
Mhm.
but you're not actually doing what's best for yourself or anyone around you when you do that. So, do you have some
Well, yeah.
tips on how to really kind of let go of that control and let other people contribute?
Well, yeah. So that's such a great question. And, I mean, as far as tips go, you know, there's ways to just prepare in advance for baby. Um, whether that is getting together with your partner and um, coming up with scenarios like, what would you do in this scenario? The baby won't stop crying and you need help. And so, just, I mean, even scenarios like, or questions around bigger picture things like, what kind of school do you see our child going to? I think that we need to have these conversations together as partners, um, that open up this bigger conversation together where we kind of are getting to know each other a little bit more, and ways that we want to raise our child together, because it's a partnership and it's always going to be a partnership, right? And so if you can have even some of those conversations, it helps you, I think, sort of strategize together better, in this postpartum period, and it just makes you bond and better partners. Um, but as far as simple tips around just accepting help, I mean, some people just will or will not, and maybe there's a deeper therapy conversation, like with a counselor, around like where we get stuck around that. But I definitely always suggest to people, couples, make sure that you have a meal train set up. Get your friends, they want to help, they want to know how to help. Set boundaries, though, too. When can people come visit? Maybe when should they not come visit? Um, and, or batch cooking in advance and having meals ready to go, so that that's just not the thing that you're going to want to focus on. And of course, just self-care. So there's all kinds of tips around sleep hygiene, which I know you're familiar with. It's just like, how do we get better sleep and get to bed earlier, since our deeper hours of sleep happen in the earlier part of the night. And that's when our growth hormone is active, right? So we are recovering and we're repairing tissues, and all of that is happening, and cleaning up and detoxing a bit, and so that is important as well. So supporting each other, maybe if you've got your mom or your mother-in-law, sisters that are willing or close to be able to support. But and then those self-care habits, that to me are just, you got to have time for yourself, and so taking a hot bath, and you know, doing your skincare routine, your gua sha, or whatever it is, But I think those things are so important to, like, keep taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I
Ask
love
for help.
that. I think planning ahead for those obstacles, planning ahead for the things that you can see are going to be difficult, especially if you're one of those kind of type A control type people, know
Yeah.
that about yourself, accept
Yeah.
it, and plan for that so that
Yes.
when those tendencies come up, you've already planned for what you're going to do to relinquish a
Absolutely.
little bit of control, let someone else help. You already have a plan in place for that. I think that's great.
Yeah, and having a plan in place also for the mental health side too. So talk to your, if you have an underlying mood disorder, make sure that you're talking with your counselor and you have a plan for what that's going to look like after having the baby. But yeah, the more that we can plan, the more in control I think we feel. But it also, we can let go of some of that control and still plan, for other people to take on some of these roles. And it's really the best thing that you can do for yourself. It's the best thing that you can do for your family. Um, it's going to take the pressure off of, you know, the the partner relationship, I think, but it's also going to take the pressure off of, mom, and it's just like both mentally and physically, it's and emotionally, but physically too. It's really going to help you recover faster.
Yeah, I love that. So let's actually back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about like infertility or fertility. What are some things people can do if they want to get pregnant, or they want to, kind of refine that whole process so that it's easier when they do want to get pregnant? What are some things that
Yeah,
they can either start doing or stop doing that'll help that process?
sure, absolutely. It's a great question. So I like to think of the kind of 90-day reset for both partners. And, I'm probably not going to go into too much detail around exactly what that looks like, but, you know, our egg and sperm health really, both, especially the sperm, like this is turning over about every 75 to 90 days or something like that. And so dads really have some control over, like, okay, healthy sperm, right? Good swimmers, no abnormalities, that kind of thing. And so um, I talk about putting them on a nutrient dense diet. We clean up, we get rid of alcohol, we get rid of, if they're smoking, we talk about and try to address um, eliminating that, of course, because all of these things there's evidence to show that they do indeed, um, disrupt healthy sperm function and development. So, and then for mom, it's similar. We're really looking to support both partners in being able to bring their best DNA forward. So again, this looks like staying hydrated, getting enough sleep, which, I mean, we could just talk about sleep all day long, but
Mhm.
getting enough sleep, eating the right foods, getting the right macronutrients. And the reality is uh, for women, weight, comes into play as well, because we don't want to be underweight. When we're underweight, it's actually very difficult to conceive. Sometimes anovulation, not ovulating, is fairly common when we're underweight, and so we have to address that. But we also don't want to be overweight, because when we're overweight, we are looking at the potential during pregnancy, especially, to have to worry about gestational diabetes, which is a form of diabetes just during the gestational period. And then also possibly preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure during pregnancy. And it can be very dangerous, actually, both for mom and baby. So addressing healthy weight, and we also want to do that in order to regulate the cycle. So if we have any kind of menstrual cycle issues where it's kind of irregular, we really just want to rebalance that so that we can determine when we're ovulating more efficiently. And then, yeah, I would say that just folate, folic acid, another really, really important nutrient. We know that based on, the neural tube closure, and it's really important for avoiding the neural tube defects. But on top of that, um, I think it's the research is just kind of exploring other areas, even preeclampsia, like how folic acid or folate is involved in that, in other pathways. So important to both parents, because it's just so important to DNA replication, and especially mom. And so I always say, get on that prenatal, like 3 months before trying, and make sure your body is getting what it needs. Because yes, we always want to get it from food, what we want from food, what we need from food. And that's my priority working with people. But we absolutely need to take precautions. And I always have a prenatal vitamin during all the stages, and even postpartum. You can continue on your prenatal vitamin, or you could switch to, like a multivitamin.
Okay. And do you also recommend like cycle tracking, any lab testing, anything else that people can do for the women and the men to really
Yeah.
prepare, make sure that their body's in the right state?
Yes. So, given the fact that infertility is actually only 50% an issue for females, it's actually 50% of it is an issue with males, and it's usually sperm quality and number. And so, for men, I would say the first basic step is going to be to just go get that, um, the testing of the overall sperm count, and looking at sperm health. But for women, it's just I just actually had a little podcast with a coworker of mine over at SATVA. She's Dr. Jen Horton. She's a functional doctor over there, and we talked about this. Just having a preconception checkup, and what that should look like. So I encourage people to check that out in more detail, and I'll give my information at the end. But um, in that checkup, you're getting sort of this general assessment of health as the female that's looking to get pregnant. And, just looking at blood pressure. Is my blood pressure good? Am I a risk for preeclampsia? What does my blood sugar look like? Am I a risk for gestational diabetes? And also, if getting advice from your doctor around, if you're already potentially smoking, or, you're drinking any alcohol, the doctor, he or she might talk to you about teratogens and chemicals that disrupt fetal development. So usually, basically starting there is good enough, just kind of getting your essential blood work, like your CBC and your metabolic panel checked and that kind of thing, just to kind of assess how things generally look, your lipids. But yes, if you've tried for 12 months with unprotected sex, that's what defines infertility. And so that is where you want to start looking at potential deeper testing, right? We're going to look at progesterone and estrogen levels, the sex hormones. We want to look at thyroid hormones. We're also going to look at the stress hormones, our cortisol, because stress can be a big factor in infertility as well. So this is where it's really great to connect with your healthcare professional, whoever that is, and look at, what am I missing here?
Yeah, I love that. So you would recommend kind of a combination of both before you even really want to get pregnant, get a foundation. And then also, if you're having issues, then there's deeper level testing. But even before if you have any infertility, it's good to get that baseline testing and really establish where you're starting from for both the male and the female partner.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And so, yeah, it's almost like there's, different levels of testing, sort of. But it doesn't mean that you can't find out how your thyroid's doing now, and find out how your adrenals are doing now, because that's going to affect your health no matter what, getting pregnant or not, and thyroid especially, I think, is just so important, because postpartum, there's definitely a rise in autoimmune thyroiditis postpartum. So it's just something that would be good to know.
Yeah, I think that there's so many things that testing provides great value for, because there's a lot of imbalances that we can have that don't produce any overt symptoms.
Right.
So you could have a thyroid issue and never know it if you don't do the testing. You could have a blood sugar issue and never know it if you don't do the testing. You could have blood pressure even. All these things don't necessarily translate to, I can feel my blood sugar is high. No, you don't
Right.
feel it. You might feel it when it's too low. You might get shaky and hangry and all those things, but you won't feel it when it's too high. You won't feel high blood pressure necessarily, unless, you can feel your heart pounding and some of those things. But for the most part, these imbalances don't lead to symptoms.
Absolutely.
You
And
don't have
that's
enough
another,
folate or healthy fats or whatever.
yeah,
You
don't
won't feel it.
know exactly. And I think that's another, you just bring up a good point too, because I just was thinking gut testing too. Like, I mean, gut testing is so incredibly important. It's usually the first step I take for deeper level testing. Like, is there something going on in the gut? And is that actually what is behind the thyroid problem? So there's a lot to be explored.
Yeah, for
Some,
sure. There's
and
so much.
sometimes it's a very simple fix. So,
Yeah. But you
yeah.
have to
And
have that
sometimes
awareness
not.
first.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. Well, so if people want to learn more about you, either at the clinic or your virtual practice, where is the best place for them to go?
Right. So I practice here in Lakewood, Colorado at Sattva Health and Wellness. And I also, you can find me at my website. Sattva has a website. It's love_sattva.com, I think. Sorry. But I think that's right. And then you can also find me at www.rebelrootsnutrition.com. Yep. And yeah, you can email me if you have any questions regarding anything I mentioned or talked about today. Carla at rebelrootsnutrition.com. I'm also on Instagram as well, Rebel Roots Nutrition. And a lot of what we talked about today, I've got lots of posts that kind of go into more detail about some of those topics. So
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. I know you have so much more than we were able to get to today, but thank you for sharing your tips and insights into what people need to pay attention to and the things that they need to maybe not pay attention to or not focus on, like eating for two. Thank you so much for all of that amazing information. We will definitely link up all of your contact info in the show notes so that it'll be really easy for people to find and just click on. So is there anything else you would like to say before we end the episode?
I don't think so, but thank you so much, Andrea. This was such a pleasure, and I love getting to talk about, nutrition in general, but especially around the perinatal stages. So thanks so much, and yeah, I look forward to connecting again.
Thanks so much for joining me today, and we will see everyone on the next episode.